Good evening, everybody. Let's head over into Collectively Rewilding. All right. We have been busy for sure. Freudian click there. It has been an intense couple of weeks trying to get into a pattern of working in the backyard with all of that massive amount of soil and continuing to do all of the regular things that I have to do on any given day. So I apologize for being a little bit absent, or at least not fully there last week. And there is a lot of different thoughts going on right now. In the physical sense, the majority of what we're doing is moving dirt. However, there's a pattern, there's a process. We are accomplishing small steps as we go. And that's what the few little articles that I've managed to put out for you have been about, just showing that we are, I shouldn't say finalizing, we are completing the first step of building the berms that will contain the Hugel-Kultur material as well as the sprinkler line. The first layer is what we're building currently, and that will simply be garden soil that has come from all of the digging projects that we've had in the backyard. And we have completed the line along the top part of the eastern wall and started it for the little portion that remains down towards the base. The previous owners had left behind this, what should have been a composting bin, but they had filled with animal waste. And so we have to move that and get it off the property. They left a couple of bins like that in the backyard, just kind of filled with different types of waste that we're slowly incorporating into our trash to get that taken off of the property. And we're, oh my gosh, so close. They have two more things. And then they're out of our way. It's going to be very much better. We had a huge pile that we had to get out that they had started, just literal trash that was large, not disgusting trash or anything, a broken door, the old steps that led out to the backyard, different pieces like that they had just piled up and not dealt with, obviously, for quite some time. They also, though, in our favor, had left several dead trees that they had been dealing with on the property here, which of course we've moved over into our glorious wood pile over here on the far northeast corner of the property. We have a pretty decent sized pile of dead tree material that we'll trim down and cut up and break up and add on to the next layer for the Hugel, oh my gosh, I'm having trouble saying that, Hugel-Kultur layer of these berms. We'll probably put the sprinkler down, then the Hugel-Kultur. Right now, we have, maybe a little bit more than half of the bases built for the various planned berms. Okay, that's kind of a misspeak. Let me just pull up my little map here so that I can better explain where we're at in the process. I think that will give it a lot more context and be a little bit more interesting as well. Okay, give it just a second. There's a lot going on with this garden planner, so it does take it a moment to load. They have all types of plants and garden structures, all different things that you can add into your garden planning, but that takes a little bit to load. So when I say that we've gotten about 50% of the bases for these swales built, I'm not talking, or excuse me, these berms, I'm not talking about the swale berm systems. We have two small, almost connected, complete swale berm systems. The others are just berms without the dip down for the swell. Swale, I think of it almost as a swell in a wave. You go, you have your little hill for the berm and then a dip down for the wave, right? And if you had a large property, you might even incorporate some of that into the overall landscape. Here, of course, we just have two small strips of the actual berm swale tool set, right? So the longer one here along this wall, retaining wall that was already on the property that we really like and we wanted to follow the curvature of. So it was kind of hard to get this exactly how I wanted it. This actually curves along the wall as it should. I am really blessed in that my father is an amazing excavator operator. He was very capable of putting in the somewhat delicate or very detailed pieces that I wanted dug in, especially with these swales and berms, because they only went down about 2 feet for the swale, and then he took all of that dirt and put it right back behind it for the berm itself. So there's not a whole lot that needs to be done to the 2 swale and berm systems. They're more complete as they are. However, especially with this side here, it's almost been overtaken by the mound of soil that was dug up for the Wally Peony itself. And that's where I finally gotten to start in. So the first thing that I did was to complete an area that could actually get completed to the stage that we're working on right now with those bases for the berms being built. And so with the soil that was dug out of the sunken garden, I have gotten the entire berm built along this back wall, this eastern wall. We're not going to have a berm over here. There are a couple of rose bushes that were already in, and we've added the rose bush that we brought to the property right about here. And this is actually a little bit bigger with my dimensions than what it shows here. And this, as we get more and more in depth with the property, is quite a bit smaller than what I have measured out. So it's almost like the little extra bit that is here really should have been up in this little corner. And so with the berm system completed over here, I've also gotten the bases for the berms around the sunken garden completed. Not quite a berm and swale, and yet still the principle holds because it's a sunken area next to that berm. And it's a deeper, structure than those that were for the berm swell system. Like I said, this is about a 2-foot deep swell, and the sunken garden is probably 3.5 to 4 feet deep at its deepest point. Now, when the sunken garden and all of this was being created, my father and my husband were out there along with my husband's friend, James, who is really interested in all of this that we're doing here, and hopefully eventually we'll hear from him. He's kind of been along for the ride. He's got a membership here in Collectively Rewilding, but he's outside, never really in on the computer, so we haven't gotten to drag him in yet to talk to us about some of the things that he knows and does. And it's very interesting, the stories that he has about growing up in Idaho, and his mother is still out on this forest property where you lease from the government. I have a friend in Montana that has a similar property. It's a very interesting arrangement. I don't know a whole lot about it, so I don't want to misspeak, but it's quite interesting to have these properties that are just in the middle of a forest that you can live on. Very fun. And so they were all out there trying to understand what it was that I wanted built, right? And they did an amazing job. The only thing that I wasn't quite able to communicate, so we have to do a little correction for, is the sunken garden was intended to have full tiers or terracing on the second layer. So it'll have the very bottom layer, that's the actual full sunken garden, and then it'll have a layer of terracing, and then it'll come up to the ground level with a berm right behind it. So almost 3 layers there. And the middle part of the terrace here got dug all the way through. So there is no completion for the terracing here. We're going to add a little bit of a boundary, a little bit of, the words are failing me, like a retaining wall piece. It's just really small though. I don't know how we would actually, I want something thinner than thicker. So I don't want to use like big blocks or anything like that, or even the traditional spacers that maybe are about that big. I'd like to keep it smaller if I can. And so what I'm thinking is, we have all these great rocks. Perhaps we'll build a small rock wall right there so that I can add that bench back to the terracing so that it's complete on 3 sides. As we built it and as it's all coming together, I realized that it's probably not practical to have it around all four sides, and I do need to have an entrance and exit system instead of just walking on the steps. They're kind of deep, and it's not very practical to step down on the terracing. So this south-facing side will have probably a ramp, perhaps some stairs. I haven't completely decided. Most likely a ramp. We actually inherited with this purchase of this property weird tool that has a square base, and it's just flat, almost like a gridiron or something, and then it has a pole that comes up and you stamp it down. So most of the time I don't want to compact the soil, but one of the next steps I'm actually planning, maybe even this week, is to take that tool and turn that south-facing portion into a ramp that we may add some structural components to help retain the overall shaping, right? And so this is pretty well completed on this side, other than that bench that needs to get added back. And there's some extra dirt right around here that still needs to get taken out to fully complete the shaping of this berm on that upper eastern portion of the wall there. All right, now where we're at this point is to dig into the soil that's right around here from the Wally Peony dig. And we're going to start digging in from this side, because I tried to come in so that I could separate the mound of soil from these structures, the bund and this berm and swale system. And it was just really awkward. I couldn't really get in and get any kind of traction. It was almost a little dangerous when you're trying to get force with a shovel and you're standing on uneven ground. It just wasn't a very good idea. So I'm going to come at it from about this point, which means that I have to work all the way up through that soil pile to begin working on the swale and berm at this end of the garden, which is a little bit overwhelming and a little bit disheartening. But as my husband is saying, try to look at it just one day at a time, which is definitely how I have been approaching it. I knew this was going to be a big project, and still there was probably, maybe a third more soil than I would have expected. However, I wanted to get in and complete the pieces so that they could start retaining the water and everything. Then we could come to this big, huge mound of soil that was the Wally Peony, and it's just not working out like that. So a little bit of a setback, but as I said, when you're doing something this large and you don't have the finances to just pay a bunch of people to come in and put it together and complete it, you have to be flexible. It doesn't always work out the way that you planned. And that's one of the things that I really like to showcase here. As I've mentioned before, I've never really come across anybody showcasing the process of putting these types of structures into a garden. You just see the completed garden, and then they may talk about it a little bit, and they talk about maintaining it, but they don't really talk about how they got it to that point. So that's what we talk about a lot here. And that's what I'll be doing for at least probably this entire growing season into the fall, until the temperature perhaps freezes the ground and there's too much snow. This last winter, actually, if we would have been better set up, I could have worked through the majority of the year on the wood chip pile, right? However, I'm glad that I didn't move any further forward. Most of the wood chips that we put down over the last season weren't disturbed by the digging that was done. So they're still doing the job that they were needed for. And we were able to take the last little bit and really continue that, and even finalize some torn up pieces from the excavator, right? That's a big, heavy machine. It wasn't one of the little ones. It may not have been as big as it could have, but it barely fit into the area in order to create this sunken garden over here. Though it is larger than what my image conveys, getting the sunken garden put in actually is more about like here on the property, and getting that piece of equipment in and out without damaging the structure that had just been created was a bit tricky. Again, it's really lucky that I had someone who is so experienced with handling these pieces of equipment able to do this for me. All right, and so with having said all of that, digging into the soil here, I'm now moving it along this wall. There are these little structures that we had initially thought we might turn into quail coops. However, they're more deteriorated than we really want to deal with. And so we're going to break them down, utilize what we can out of that wood and that reclaimed material, and move forward. We'll probably end up with one quail hutch to begin with. They're so expensive, whether you build them or buy them already built. It's not a cheap venture with the cost of wood and things these days, just the cost of everything. So rather than starting with 2 hutches as we had intended, we'll probably be starting with 1 and maybe incorporating in the rabbits if we're able to do that before we even approach the second hutch of quail. And so the berm will go all the way along this back wall here. It's this brown structure. And oops.
Like a date.
I've gotten it to, the pile, again, this is bigger in representation than it really is. The hutch is probably actually compared to the pile right about here. So a good 5 to 10 feet closer, the end of the dirt being right about here, and I've gotten about halfway through the berm over here to getting it to the wood or to the dirt pile, continue it on over here. Then with this portion of it, this is going to get a little tricky. We wanted to work in as much as legitimately possible with everything that we're doing, and the edge of the Walipini is close enough to the fence that the dirt that was put over here for the berm is going to be very difficult to work just with the position of the soil. So I'm going to have to figure out how exactly we're going to deal with that. It may sort of just have to stay as is a little bit more than I would have liked. I've really been able to shape the other berms as they're going along, and those that were built with the machine in the berm and soil system are already very nicely formed. They need a little bit of additional material and some things like that. And then the soil mound has destroyed some of the shaping that was there originally for this side right here, but it's still really quite solid and won't need a whole lot. This over here will be a little bit of a different situation. And once we start getting into that dirt and able to get over to the side a little more readily, we can, of course, up here. But this is from about, say right around here all the way back. This is all covered in dirt and soil now. And so we can access the hole that is the Walipini, the planned Walipini, and we can get kind of right up over here. But to get to this actual area in the corner, you'd be climbing under. Not that you couldn't do it, but that's not something that we'll be doing. We don't want to compact the soil. We want to get it, move it where it's supposed to be, keep it as loose as possible. Some of it was really decent quality topsoil, so we're trying to utilize that as much as possible, both because I don't want to have to, as I consider it, steal resources from other locations to improve the quality here and want to work with the resources here. It's also a lot more financially feasible, the least amount of material that you have to purchase to bring onto your property, right? All right, so I think that's a pretty good overview of what we've been doing this last little bit. We did completely get rid of all of the extra wood chips that were out front. They've all been utilized. We have a nice little fire pit right here with some rock area to keep it away from the wood chips, and a bench for sitting. So even though this is in so much turmoil, there's already nice little patches that are starting to show up and that we're going to make use of. So really exciting, everything that's been going on as far as the backyard garden. It really will be a pretty intense garden when you think backyard garden. Even if you think a larger garden, maybe 20 by 15, 20 by 30, those are some of what our mind pictures as a backyard garden. This is actually going to be the entire backyard. Of course, we're going to be walking on portions of it that won't have plants, but that's all there's going to be, plants and areas to walk around within those plants. There's not going to be any grassy area. This is the little pavilion that was already built that we're hoping to save. We're not going to put seating out here, or at least not very much. This is more of like a wash station and an area to stage whatever we've got going on, to bring in things from harvesting them so that they're out of the sun while we're getting some more, washing it off, processing it whenever possible outside to save room from being inside, all of these great things. So this is a little mini farm, basically, that's being created back here, not a typical backyard garden. And I think that anybody that's interested that has one of the yards that came from, not the last 10 to 15 years, they're really starting to shrink up those yards, making it a lot harder. You can definitely do a lot with a small yard. However, you can't turn it into something that might be like a mini farm as easily. Not that it can't be done, but it would take a lot of creative thinking, and it would probably take some of the space inside your home, or at least your garage, things like that, right? So anybody with a more 80s, 90s, 2000s type of a yard structure can get close to doing what we're doing here. You may not want to go to the full length of a Walipini, but a lot of these other structures to put into your yard to retain soil, to improve the soil quality, to improve the amount of arable land, or to increase the amount of arable land that you have access to, they are very approachable in any type of traditional older school yard, right? All right, very fun. So now we've had a lot of different pieces that you can check out what we've been doing with the dirt, of course, and just throwing out those pieces that are timely. Any type of material that comes out from M.I. Gardner, Callie Kim, the California Native Plant Society, Wild Forager, all of these folks is going to be timely to what we're dealing with right now, right? So what M.I. Gardner's talking about here, before you take your seedling tray and transfer those guys right out into your garden, you need to harden off your plants. And what that means is you acclimatize them to being outdoors, right? When you're creating your seedling trays, when you're growing those babies, they're typically going to be sheltered in some fashion, whether it's inside your house, in a greenhouse, maybe on your porch and you bring them in when it's not nice weather, all these different things that people do in order to create seedlings for their garden. You're sheltering your plants. And so they're not used to the wind and the sun and the different temperatures from the day to the night. So what you do is you slowly harden them off. You bring them out into a shady area to start with so that they start feeling the wind and they have that ambient sunlight so they can feel the temperature change, all of that. And then you start slowly putting them out into the sun, not that slowly, a week to 2 weeks. And you work it out so more and more you're able to just kind of leave it where it's going to be in the garden towards your last few days, your last day or two, however long you've chosen to do this, depending on your climate, if it's harsher, if it's more mild. And then once they've managed to pretty much go through a full day and night without any problems, then you go ahead and put them into the garden, right? So you got to keep an eye on the plants themselves to see how they're doing as you're hardening them off. If they look like they're suffering, back off a little. If they look like they're not having any problem at all, maybe push it up a little bit, right? Feel your plants. Learn to notice wilting leaves or drooping leaves, the discolorations that come across plants. And with Google out there, there are so many more resources available to narrow down what's going on when you see yellowing, of your leaves, when you see spots, when you see any kind of coating, all of these different things, you're able to go out and look at what's out there to narrow it down. Whereas previously, you'd have to hope it was in a book you might read, or that you might come across the lore from a fellow gardener, or family member, friend that gardens, these types of things. And now it's just a plethora. And so again, that's where you always want to vet your resources. And you can always ask us to come and look at what you're dealing with, show us some pictures, and then we can take it out and give you the most likely possibilities, walk some questions through with you to really narrow in and target how to fix any problems that you might be experiencing with the plants that you are putting in the ground, that you've had for years, whatever the case may be, right? And then finally, what we've been going over is really kind of putting away everything that we'd planned to plant this year. I've already put away all the seeds and gotten them ready. I'm going to stick with basically the same idea next year. Of course, it may change a little, but I set them back as the groups already planned for next year so that it's easy to go forward. We have gotten the shed cleaned out so that it's almost all ready just for gardening. There's a little bit more to do there, but it's getting so close to being exactly what it's meant to be fully for gardening as a shed. And so our winter gardening pieces that we purchased when they were at an affordable price to set back have all been set out there, including the seedling shelves that we had actually intended to use this year before it just got too much, one with moving in so recently, trying to make the space in the garage to deal with creating the soil because we don't have the garage, or we didn't have the shed ready yet, all of these different things. And then on top of that, having the ability to get the garden structures put in that we thought might not be put in more till the fall. So everything conspired so that we didn't end up doing any type of seedlings, and we're not going to end up doing any type of gardening, not even in the previously created raised bed, simply because we have too much going on. We need to really focus on getting that soil where it needs to be so that it can get the mulch on top of it, so that the soil retains the quality that it has now and doesn't lose that through exposure, and so that we quit having just huge mounds of dirt in our backyard, right? So all of these things have led up to getting all of our seedling materials and support propaganda, all of those pieces put out into the shed, put away into the closet, because you don't want your seeds in a really cold or really heated environment. You want to keep them at a more stable, more room temperature environment. 55 and above is really okay, to about maybe 72, 75 is about the ideal range to store most seeds. All right. And so, having said that, I tore through all of the literature that has been planned and that we're going to use. I've taken out pieces that I've started, and this is my gardening book. So this is what I'm going to be going through when I have time and planning out exactly what I want to do with the garden when we're finally able to start in, hopefully next year, right? I'm just going to work on it almost every day. I didn't work on it today, one with class, two, I do have to absolutely let my body rest in between, and on Saturdays and Sundays when Jay's here as well to get out into the garden, we do a little bit more. So it was good to let my body just rest, have class tonight, and then I'll be back out there again tomorrow. We may get a little bit of rain towards the end of the week. That's really not a huge problem. Any deterioration that happens to the Walipini or to the sunken garden, even to the berms and swales, will be readily corrected. It's not that big of a deal. And the moisture is already going to start getting retained into these structures that have been built, even into the Walipini at this point. I would like to get that sealed off so that the water isn't just coming in. It could flood it and make all kinds of problems. There are actually floodable moments here in the Tooele and Utah valleys. It's not a tremendous occurrence, but it can happen in just 15 to 20 minutes, and you've got just this little flash flood that's gone in a second. However, in a position like the Walipini, that water could be there for quite a while. Now, it's deep enough that the quality of the soil, we've gone through the topsoil into the rock layer and then the sand layer. And so that's going to drain out really quickly. I don't see it being a huge problem as far as retaining water in a way that we don't like it. However, all of that water that does drain out will get spread throughout the garden itself around the Walipini, and most of that has either soil on top of it to help it keep that water, or it dips down, all of these different things with the mulching over what we've been able to put the mulch on, that it's going to start retaining the water, so that in 2 or 3 years, we may only have to water 2 or 3 times a year to maintain the garden. That's the purpose of Hugel Culture and what we're testing to see if it holds out in this desert climate, right? All right. Seems like, oh, and so speaking of wood chips, I want to again talk about a resource out there that is such a tremendous resource for gardeners everywhere in America, at least. I don't know how far it goes, and that's called getchipdrop.com. Getchipdrop.com. And here you are. It's very easy. You sign up for free. It is a cost-free service. If you choose, you can pay $20 to $80, and all that does is go towards the tree trimming service that brings you your wood chips so that they can use the site for free as well. It's not free for the tree trimmers. They have to pay $20 a time to find somebody that will take these free wood chips off of their hands so that they don't have to pay to waste them into a wood fill, or excuse me, into a landfill, right? And so if you are able and interested, you can put out a $20 to $80 little contribution so that that company can then use this site for free for the next 1 to 4 times, or you can do it entirely for free. Of course, if you're able to contribute a little bit, you'll probably get those free wood chips a little bit more quickly. However, I know that people do it for no additional cost and they get their wood chips eventually. Now, you do have to put in a new order. I believe it's every 3 months. All right. So for a free object, you don't get to decide when it's delivered, right? You have to have your area prepared and available to them. You need to have pictures of where you want it delivered. They prefer 2 locations possible for delivery. I have not ever had that option here or at the previous rental that we had before purchasing this property. There was 1 location and 1 location only. So they will accept that, but it's what they prefer. Not a hard application. You go in, put in your address, tell them if there's anything you don't want, tell them if you would accept any logs or not logs, and then sign up and wait for your chip delivery, right? Really neat. I did try it in the rental that we were in, and I was never able to get a chip drop, and then we knew we were going to be moving and we didn't want to leave that there for our landlady, of course, so she had given us permission to get one. So we didn't renew our request for a chip drop. And then we moved here and we renewed our request and got one within, I don't know, maybe 2 months. It was amazing. They came, they dropped, they left, and we just barely managed to utilize all of the wood chips that they provided. Now, not only because of the Hugel Kultur material that we need, but also because we want to mulch all of these structures once they're finalized, again, to retain that moisture and the nutrients and soil structure, all of these things that happen when you're able to add a healthy mulch onto soil, whether it's quality or not quality. We had examples of both in our backyard. Most of the soil on the upper portion, what was actually considered the yard, where the retaining wall separated the better soil from the lesser soil, that's already been mulched over, right? So that's already out there ready to go, with the exception of the sunken garden. I have gotten the bases primarily completed, but we didn't have enough wood chips to continue that process and put that down. So I will be signing up for another chip drop. Also, I have made a contact with one of the tree trimming services in, I believe, the Tooele Valley, and it's Dad's Tree Services, Dad's Tree Trimming Services. Let me just look. I do like to give people props when they have helped me out in any way, and especially when they're providing something that's so valuable to me. For only, I think I gave $40 so that they could use the site for myself and then for one other time. And just amazing, amazing opportunity. So it's Dad's Tree Service, yeah. And they are ready to bring another load when they're able. They don't have one currently, so that's why I want to get another one started. Also, I'd like to just get another one started because I'm going to be using so much. So where the wood chip pile was on this side yard over here has been completely covered over with mulch as well, and that was not dead soil. There was nasty, tumbleweed, the kinds that have the just nasty little prickies, and they're never really any good use for anyone or anything in a residential area, and they cause problems even for grazing animals, things like that. Just kind of a nasty plant if it's not out in nature where it belongs, right? So it was just covered with these nasty weeds. We've mulched it over. Very few of those weeds are coming up through. And since we're not going to be able to do any gardening this year, we're going to get out our sprayer and mix up Dawn vinegar and water in equal parts to spray all of that down. We don't want to add salt because we do want to grow there eventually. But for this season, when we're not going to be growing, we want to put that down and it'll wash through before we're ready to go next growing season, as long as we don't just like inundate it or put it on right before, something like that, as long as we let the majority of the winter take away what we've done to get rid of the weeds that do make it up through that mulch layer, will be gone, and it will be ready for new plants and so much healthier for all of the wood chips and even the weeds that will start breaking down in underneath that wood mulch, right? So hopefully we'll keep the majority of them from coming back up once we're ready to start growing there. Of course, anytime that you're dealing with a garden, even if it's things that are blown in, you do have to do a little bit of weeding, but we're definitely working towards having less weeds than more, right? And so with that being said, we have that entirely mulched over there. Next, we're going to take some of the soil and put an entire layer of soil, again, helping to keep those weeds from coming up, and adding a lot of it will be better. Some of it's going to be the sand from the Walipini going so deep. We just get into that sand layer, but plants most often do like a little bit of sand. So it's all going to be just really great soil to put over that wood mulch, and then we're going to mulch it again. Now, when you do something like Hugelkultur and you're putting these wood chips or these broken down dead trees, your uncomposted, compostable goods, all these things, when it's wood in nature, you need to be aware that it is going to steal some of the nitrogen from your soil in the decomposition process for the breakdown of that wood. So you need to counteract that with things like clover to reintroduce a nitrogen fixer into your soil without having to use the nasty chemicals to do that, right? So definitely be aware if you're going to utilize Hugelkultur and it has much of a wood component, you need to be putting nitrogen back into your soil to help it recover from the soil process of decomposition that wood goes through, right? And another thing that you want to be aware of when you're signing up for these wood chips, not only do you need to know whether you're going to be willing to accept a few logs or not, you also want to caution and say that you do not want things like black walnut, eucalyptus. Some of these types of plants will really cause damage to any kind of garden that you want to have. If you don't want plants and you just want to have a wood mulch area, throwing a lot of black walnut or eucalyptus into the mix will definitely help you to achieve that. Understanding the plant and the plants and plant materials that you're working with can help you to achieve the results you want without having to bring in the chemical fertilizers or continue to take resources from other properties. These things can be done in a natural way as well. Just think, of course, humanity has been around for at least, what, a couple 100,000 years. And we've only had these truly chemical fertilizers and deterrents like fungicides and herbicides and pesticides for the last 150 years, the industrialized time period of human history. So what did people do before there was a Lowe's and all of these yucky chemicals, whether it is chemically created urea, as we've discussed, which is actually essentially a chemically created urine, when you can safely utilize human urine and it can go through the processes needed to keep it safe when adding that nutritive material back into your soils. All of these different things that humanity did before they could go to their big box stores and buy chemical. It's not just chemicals, it's outside of natural processes. We've turned it into something, into a form of something that you would never find in nature, right? And that is not, as we're learning more and more, really a desirable outcome. It doesn't lead to a more positive agricultural stability of the industry. It's actually really harming our farmers and our agricultural producers that are what create the food that we put into our mouths, right? So it's something to really think about and talk about with people and talk about the alternatives that are out there. You do not have to use chemicals in order to be successful in the garden, all right? It's a lot of wonderful possibilities, and more people are talking about it. I was only able to find a couple of people on the internet talking about pea cycling, which I've talked about for years, but it's out there and you can find it. And they were reputable sources, one scholarly and one partner with Mother Earth News, which is a recognizable name in the agricultural world, right? So there are alternatives out there, and that's what we're doing in the backyard and turning it into a mini farm instead of a traditional backyard. We're also going to explore some fun things like making ancient concrete. Ancient concrete, while is not as strong as our modern forms of concrete, actually lasts a lot longer. You could never build a skyscraper with ancient forms of concrete, but the kinds of concrete that we create today that can, yes, build a skyscraper tend to only last about 100 to 150 years before they have to be replaced or supported, all these different things, right? I'm not a big concrete person. I don't know a whole lot about it, so I don't want to misspeak there. But when they're dealing with concrete, yes, our modern concrete only lasts like 100 to 150 years. Ancient concrete, while it would never be able to support a large structure like that, lasts thousands of years. Amazingly strong materials. And once again, yes, many times ancient concrete, one of the chemical components, the natural chemical components that they used to create concrete was urine, volcanic ash, sand. There are some different things. And it's been a little while since I've done my research, but I've been thinking about it lately. And at least one of our raised beds, we're going to attempt to recreate some form of ancient concrete recipe to create a little raised bed. And of course, we'll bring you all along with us. It should be tons of fun. My husband is already super excited about doing this, right? Do you guys believe me? I take him for some wild rides, folks. I promise you. It gets very interesting when I work through all these experiments, combining our modern scientific processes with the ancient, more intuitive and natural processes that our ancestors use all across the globe becomes a little bit intense sometimes. And so we should all appreciate him and the crazy conversations that he's had to have in order to convince him to play along with me when I put all of these different pieces into play throughout learning and experimenting before we got to this place here where we're ready to put it into play. We've been planning a Wally Peony already for at least, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. So these aren't new things to him, but I keep adding new pieces. And he's a very tolerant man, right? So I really appreciate him, and I hope you guys give him some props for having to put up with the wild adventures that I drag him along on. All right, so looks like we have probably someone saying hi. Hey, Benny, nice to see you all, of course. Do we have any questions? You're more than welcome to unmute yourselves and ask, or Benny, I know you're always busy in kind of a loud environment. Any questions you might have? Kind of jumped around all over, but these are the different things that we're doing here as Collectively Rewilding to keep moving that sustainable methodology and message forward, right? All right, everybody. Well, hopefully you really were right there with me and followed along, and I didn't just blow your mind with too much information. You don't even know where to start. And I hope you're all out there enjoying the great outdoors and really digging in. Whether you're out there like I am, getting ready to build it, you've already built something, or you're just in the planning stages, like I've primarily been, little experiments, you know, pots here, pots there, a couple of times having a little garden, all these experiments that I've done throughout the entirety of my life, right? To now really putting it into play anywhere along the process. We hope that you're having fun and getting a little dirt under your fingernails while you're doing it, right? All right, everybody.
Sabrina.
Please feel free to unmute yourselves and say good night. And whether or not we hear from you, I hope you have a beautiful evening.
Sabrina, can you hear me?
I apologize. I didn't have my speakers on. Oh my goodness. Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead. Did anybody have questions and I just didn't hear them?
Yes, Vanessa.
I just wanted to ask, when you do the concrete, can you do the process with us? Show us how you do it.
I absolutely will. I'll take you along with me.
I've never heard about that.
Yeah, it's really fun. I did the research about 2 years ago, And there are all kinds of different formations. One of the best I'm not going to have access to, volcanic ash. That really seems to be a very common component to some of the strongest ancient concretes that have been studied, right, to understand the components and things.
Yeah.
One of the, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, yeah, that just was super interesting.
It really is. And one of the things that this volcanic ash and some of these other components, and I don't want to misspeak, like I said, it's been about 2 years, they found that the actual structure of the concrete itself has living components that help to keep that strength in the material. Really interesting. So yeah, I will definitely bring you guys along, only not only for the process, mixing it and building the structure, but actually through the research so that you can see the different options, because there's more than one variation. And some of you are closer to places where you might be able to get some volcanic ash to mix in. So tons of fun, and I would love to hear if any of you try it as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Vanessa. I appreciate it. I apologize. I didn't realize that I didn't have my speakers on, everyone. Miss Ethel isn't too forgiving, I guess. All right. Anything else that we could talk about that you're interested in, everyone?
Benny has a something. He just speaking to everybody in the chat. He didn't, he can't talk with Lucky around.
I think there's a lot of family activity that goes on in the background where Benny is. So definitely. Yeah, I really find this stuff fascinating, and I hope you guys have as much fun as I do finding out how much these now interconnected systems will work together, right? It's going to be a big experiment. There have been all of these components done by many, many, sometimes millions of people over thousands and thousands of years. However, I'm not aware of anyone that has ever taken terracing into really actually into a sunken garden. It's not even generally the idea there. If anything, they might have done it to just kind of step down, but it's not the biggest part of the sunken garden. Certainly not a sunken garden with terracing, with berms, and then the swales and the walipini. That one doesn't usually get included in that kind of conversation. It's sort of a different kind of a garden structure, but again, it's not the most common garden structure. And I've never seen anybody walk through the process of putting one up together. So we're all going to be doing a lot of learning, because there isn't anything out there really quite like what we're doing here together. So definitely fun. All right, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I will maybe see you again. Oh, you know what? Let's go and check. I can't ever remember when our Q&A is, and we haven't managed to formally have it quite yet with Miss Tammy, who it was created for, right? I know she's got so many questions always. That will be this coming Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Mountain, 9:30 p.m. Central, and 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully you're all able to join. That's just a half an hour class. Really kind of focus in and get anything you guys have answered, and then get you back to your busy lives. All right, everybody. Hope to see you there, and hope you have a great night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Ethel. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the
Good night, everyone.
Bye, guys. Oh,
Good night, Rocky.
Bye as well. Yeah, she's definitely making her presence known. All right. Bye, everyone.